Today, let's talk about what you're going to do when your garden produces way more cucumbers than you can possibly eat or give away. What I like to do when the cucumbers start piling up, like they do every year, is I like to make quick pickles. Now, these are pickles that go in the refrigerator. There's no canning or heat processing or anything, so you can just chop a cucumber and get it in the fridge. So let's look at what that involves. The first thing you want to do is chop off a nice, decent-sized section from the blossom end of your cucumber, because if you leave that in when you're trying to make your pickles, it's going to make the rest of the pickles in the jar go soft faster. So get rid of the blossom end. And then it's just chopping them up, and you can do them in sticks or you can do them however you want, however you like to eat your pickles. I prefer them like this because I mostly use them for sandwiches and toast and things like that. But however you want to cut them is totally fine. Then you want to fill a clean jar with your chopped up cucumbers. And that is pretty self-explanatory. You want to pack the jar quite tightly full, but you don't want to pack it so tight that your cucumber pieces are going to break. You can just try and keep them as flat as possible so you get as much into the jar as you can. Now, this jar could probably have a little bit more in it, but if you don't have a whole bunch of cucumbers or you don't want to half cut a cucumber, you just get yourself a leaf. So this is a mulberry leaf. You can use grape leaves or kiwi leaves. And what this leaf is going to do is it's going to hold the cucumbers down under the brine that we're going to put over the top. So just make your leaf roughly the right size to go into your jar and tuck it in over the top. It doesn't have to be too tidy or neat. It just needs to sit in there to hold down the cucumbers under the level that we're going to fill it up with our brine. And that is all there is to prepping your jar. Now you can put in garlic or you can put in different flavorings and stuff. I tend to keep it really simple because I'm normally in a big hurry when I'm doing this. I've got mountains of cucumber and I'm just trying to get onto the next harvest preservation task. So that is all I do, but you can really have fun with it. Let's look at that brine. So a quick pickling brine is just a 1-to-1 ratio of water to vinegar. So it really doesn't matter how much you need to make, just so long as it's a 1-to-1 ratio vinegar to water, because that is what's going to keep them good for a long period of time. So I've got my water here. I'm going to pop it into my pot. And then I'm going to measure out the same amount of vinegar. So here I'm using around 300 milliliters, because you want to make sure you're making enough to fill your jar. The more jars you've made, the more you're going to need to make. And then it is, if you're using 1 cup to 1 cup, it's 1 tablespoon of sugar and 1 tablespoon of salt. I'm just a little bit over a cup, so I'm going to use a bit more. And from this sort of preservation system, the salt and the sugar are mostly flavorings. They're not the main component in preservation, so you don't have to worry too much about your ratios on that. Whereas with other things, you do have to make sure you're very precise with that. So these are the flavorings. The vinegar is your main preservation component for this kind of pickle. All right, that's in there. We're going to heat it up until that has dissolved. Now, I don't have a gas hob in my house, so I really like to use this little portable induction cooktop, because what it does is it heats water really fast, which makes my life easier when I've got lots of little tasks to get done, because I don't have to sit there waiting for my brine to get ready to go in the jar for very long. So If you don't have gas, I would highly recommend picking up one of these little units to help you for the epically busy harvest time. All right, that is done. When you're making this kind of pickle, it's not important about temperatures, it's just about dissolving your salt and your sugar into your brine, because this is something that is not going to be shelf stable. This whole thing is going to cool down the minute this brine goes into the raw pickles, so you don't need to worry, it just needs to dissolve. Bring the level up past the leaf or past the pickles if you're not using a leaf. Now this is a regular mouth jar, which I prefer for making this kind of pickle, because if I fill the jar all the way, the cucumbers will stay wedged underneath the lip, whereas in a wide mouth jar like I have here, they'll just float up because the jar almost goes all the way. There's nothing to hold them down. But whatever jar you have, it's gonna work. It's totally fine. I've just moved to the regular mouth for doing my refrigerator pickles. We want to get out as many air bubbles as is realistically possible. And I just like to tap the jar to make that happen. But I don't worry too much about getting them all out. I just get out the main ones that come in the beginning, and that is it done. You just need to pop a lid on it. I leave it to cool down on the bench, and then I pop it in the fridge, and it's going to last in the fridge for a good 3 to 4 months. Keep an eye on it, obviously, but it is important to remember that making pickles this way does not make a shelf-stable product. You can't go and put this in your pantry. It is not a fully sterile process. The vinegar is preserving it, but it does need to go in the refrigerator to stay safe to consume. I really like to use this method for dealing with all my cucumbers. It's fast, it's easy, and harvest is a crazy time. There's just so much happening. Your attention's getting pulled multiple different ways. So get those cucumbers into the fridge and enjoy them well into autumn time.